Also, we're going to be joined right now by Lila Rose. She, of course, is the head of a massive pro-life organization. That organization is Live Action. Lila's joining us on the line right now. Lila, go for it. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Ben. What a morning. What a day. It's surreal.
It is. I mean, it's an amazing thing. As I was just concluding there, when it comes to, what happens next, the answer is we get active, because really your job starts now. I mean, for a lot of people, a lot of politicians who promised that they were pro-life, Roe versus Wade was a convenience excuse to not do very much. Well, now Roe versus Wade is gone, and so now it's actually up to them to do something.
Listen, this is a historic moment. We all feel it. We know it. Even today, there are abortion clinics closing because of this decision, because of the overruling of Roe v. Wade. So there are children that were scheduled to be killed today by abortion that will live instead. And by the end of the day, there will likely be a dozen states where laws will have gone into effect that protect children. And then there are hundreds of laws on the books right now across the country and state by state that have been stalled because of the unjust, illogical, immoral decision of Roe v. Wade. And these laws will now be able to go into effect in the coming weeks. So this is a tremendous victory. It is a historic moment because children are now going to have protection in some states. But like you're saying, we are just getting started, because to send abortion, as they say, back to the states is not justice. We should not, as a state, whether you're a blue or a red state, get to decide whether children live or die. These are human beings. The science is conclusive. Human life doesn't begin at birth. It begins before birth, at the moment of fertilization. So the Supreme Court took a step towards justice, but this isn't full justice yet. To say that the abortion is silent on, that the Constitution is silent on abortion, and then states should get to decide whether these children live or die, that's not justice. The reality is the Constitution is not silent on abortion. In the 14th Amendment, it specifically lays out that states have to have a responsibility to provide equal protection to their people, that states cannot, without due process, deprive anyone of life, liberty, or property. Life. And that includes everyone, all human beings, including those in the womb, who are just as human as you or me. So for states to say, if you're a blue state, if I'm in stomping ground, Ben, and California is a very blue state, it's very pro-abortion, but they should not have the right to permit the unfettered killing of children in the womb. So like you're saying, our work is just getting started. We're going to work state by state for legal protections, and then we've got to do cultural change. And we have to keep on urging the Supreme Court to take a final step towards justice here and assert that there is a constitutional right to life for all children.
Yeah, that final step, it seems, frankly, based on the majority opinion, seems unlikely, mainly because, Justice Kavanaugh he writes in his concurrence that he believes that any law, a state law that prevented somebody from visiting another state in order to obtain an abortion would be presumptively illegal. So you don't even have a majority opinion on that basis. I do have to say that I'm rather unsurprised by Chief Justice Roberts' concurrence, which is predictably weak-kneed and pathetic. He basically says that he concurs in the judgment that Mississippi's law is okay constitutionally. But he says he would have created a brand new standard where a woman would have a reasonable period to get an abortion, reasonable to be left up to the ad hoc decision of justices like Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, who I would imagine would say reasonable extends all the way up till 5 years past point of birth. And in his opinion would be 10 weeks or whatever it is. It just goes to show you, President Trump, and Mitch McConnell, they got a lot of flack for not allowing Merrick Garland to fill the seat left by Justice Kennedy. But that unwillingness led to this decision today, because one vote short, really one. If this had been a 4-4 court, I have serious doubts as to whether Justice Roberts would have voted to strike down Roe versus Wade at all. And if given the choice between upholding the Mississippi law and striking down Roe versus Wade, or rejecting the Mississippi law and upholding Roe versus Wade, I have a feeling he would have gone with the latter here.
I think you're right, Ben. And listen, Justice Roberts has never been a hero for the truth on the court. And I think that, your listeners know that he has been always trying to create compromises where compromises shouldn't exist. You don't compromise with someone's right to life. You don't compromise with a fundamental human right to be born. There is no compromise. And yet, like you say, there is some mealy-mouthed compromise here and there. But the reality is that Roe v. Wade is overruled. It's done. And this is a huge step forward. And so, yes, it's not perfect, but it is a huge step forward. And I think we need to keep our eye on the goal here. The goal is complete cultural and legal change. So we can achieve change in states like Texas, already states like Missouri banning abortion completely because of the decision this morning. This is a huge step forward, but now our fight is on. Our fight is on in the blue states. Whether you're a child conceived in a blue or red state should not mean whether you live or die. If your parents want to have you scheduled for an abortion. So our work has just started. The pro-life movement is doing 3 things right now. Live Action, my organization, is focused on 3 things. First of all, education. Many people still don't understand what the abortion procedure actually entails. It's violence against that unborn developing child. They don't understand the science and the logic behind the pro-life position. They don't understand, or they haven't been really enough shown the human development in the womb. So we have to keep educating people. Number 2, legal work. We have work to do in state legislatures now to completely abolish abortion wherever it's possible. And that will happen. It's going to happen in at least 20 states. It's going to happen probably in more as we work state by state. And then we have to do the third thing, which is support and help families. We need to make our country a safer and healthier place for families, for mothers, for fathers. And that means shoring up the networks of support that our movement has, pregnancy resource centers, helping local communities, making sure that we're active in our faith communities to support young families. And there's a whole lot more to do to connect young mothers or women facing unplanned pregnancy with resources. I just encourage everyone, get in the fight now. The fight is actually just beginning. We are just getting started. And the beauty of this moment is now we have a shot. Now we have a shot to achieve complete legal protection in some states, and that will already happen. And now we have a shot to actually make sure that if you are a child, in Texas, or if you're a child in Missouri, you're going to have the protection that you deserve. So this is a huge step forward, but it's just the beginning.
And that is Lila Rose. Her organization is Live Action. If you want to go help them out, which you absolutely should, because again, the fight really begins today. Liveaction.org. It's liveaction.org to get active and protect human life on the state and eventually on the federal level. Lila, really appreciate the time on this historic and an amazing day.
Thanks, Ben.
Well, meanwhile, let's go through where the state of the law is. So with the overruling of Roe versus Wade, some 26 states are going to heavily restrict abortion almost right away. Alabama has a pre-Roe ban that snaps back into place. Arizona has a snapback law. Arkansas has a snapback law. Georgia has a 6-week ban that was already passed by the legislature in anticipation of the overruling of Roe versus Wade. Idaho has a 6-week trigger ban. Iowa has a 6-week trigger ban. Kentucky has a 6-week trigger ban. Louisiana, a 6-week trigger ban. Michigan has a pre-Roe snapback ban. Mississippi has a trigger ban at 6 weeks. Missouri at 8. North Dakota at 6, Ohio at 6, Oklahoma at 6, South Carolina at 6, South Dakota across the board, Tennessee, 6 weeks, Texas, 6 weeks. Although Attorney General Ken Paxton has now announced that effectively all abortions are illegal. He put out a statement saying, today the United States Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, thus bringing to an end a half century of the unconstitutional and unconscionable national right to abortion. Attorney General Paxton released an official advisory setting forth Texas law in light of the Supreme Court's decision. He announced the statewide closure of his agency's offices today in honor of the nearly 70 million unborn babies killed in the womb since 1973. He said, we cannot forget the extraordinary violence Roe and Casey unleashed on our nation. He says, the question of abortion returns to the states in Texas. That question has already been answered. Abortion is illegal here. I look forward to defending the pro-life laws of Texas and the lives of unborn children moving forward. So it wasn't that AG Paxton there is saying anything different, but that is the way that it is. There are all these trigger laws that were put in place in anticipation of overthrowing Roe versus Wade. That has now happened. Texas has laws, Utah, West Virginia, Wisconsin, and Wyoming. There are several states that are also likely to more heavily restrict abortion. That includes Florida, which in April enacted a 15-week abortion ban that was scheduled to go into effect next month. Indiana has enacted some 55 abortion restrictions and bans. They've paved the way for a comprehensive ban. Montana is going to seek presumably a comprehensive ban, and Nebraska as well. There are other states that will implement some sort of restrictions. North Carolina obviously was not on the list of states that I just read. So there are a few other states, but the country is now going to have a wide variety of abortion laws that now govern. And those abortion laws are going to differ by state. Now, listen, on a broader level, it would be wonderful if the federal government actually passed a law protecting the life of the unborn, or if there were a constitutional amendment to protect the life of the unborn. It would be better even if the Supreme Court had looked at the life, liberty, property protections of the Due Process Clause and said, life, forget about substantive due process. There is no due process that allows you to remove the life of an innocent unborn child. Right? They could have done that. They didn't do that. They're not going to do that, which means that, again, the fight is now going to devolve to the state level. Now, right now, there's a lot of heat. Right? There are a bunch of soldiers who are on their way to police, on their way to the court to protect the court. The left is immediately threatening violence. Right? They're immediately threatening a time of rage and a day of rage and a week of rage. I think politically speaking, realistically, I think this dies down fairly quickly. The reason I think it dies down fairly quickly is, again, because of federalism. In other words, California, which is heavily blue, are they really going to spend the next 6 months being angry over Tennessee's abortion law? New York, heavily blue. Vermont, heavily blue. Massachusetts, are they going to spend a lot of time concerned about Alabama's abortion law? You know, there's this kind of theory on the left, and in some ways the left, electorally speaking, is pretty happy because they're thinking, okay, well, now we were having a massive enthusiasm gap. Now everybody's very enthused. Yeah, the decision broke like an hour and a half ago. So they can be as enthused as they want right now. The question is, are they really enthused come November? And the answer there, I think, is going to be no, because if you remember when the leaked decision hit, there's a lot of heat on the leaked decision. And then pretty quickly it died down. I feel like something similar is going to happen here because remember, Texas has had in place 4 months an effective abortion ban in the state of Texas, you know, with people able to sue one another over obtaining abortions or involvement in the abortion process. So Texas has been a place where abortion is illegal for months and months at this point, and that has not been a national hot point, nor has it driven Democrats to the polls in places like Texas. Now, the fact that the left seems to believe that they are going to be able to win some sort of massive swing electoral victory over this, I think is shocking. I'll tell you something else that's shocking. I don't know, the Department of Justice. Remember that time the Department of Justice was supposed to not be militarized on behalf of a particular political point of view? Remember that time? Well, the Department of Justice has now released in the last 2 days alone 2 separate statements about Supreme Court decisions. They released one about the gun decision yesterday, in which they said, we respectfully disagree with the court's conclusion that the Second Amendment forbids New York's reasonable requirement that individuals seeking to carry a concealed handgun must show they need to do so for self-defense. Right? Now they have a new statement. Here's their new statement on Roe. Quote, today, the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey and held that the right to abortion is no longer protected by the Constitution. The Supreme Court has eliminated an established right that has been an essential component of women's liberty for half a century. I've never heard of a DOJ doing this sort of thing. The DOJ is a law enforcement body. It is not their job to say whether they disagree or agree with a Supreme Court decision. It is their job to implement the law. What in the actual hell? But Merrick Garland, who remember, was supposed to be on the Supreme Court if the left had its way. He and his DOJ heavily politicized. They say, this right has safeguarded women's ability to participate fully and equally in society. In renouncing this fundamental right, which it has repeatedly recognized and reaffirmed, the court has upended the doctrine of stare decisis, a key pillar of the rule of law. Basically, this is Merrick Garland's dissent. This is what you're seeing. The late, dearly departed non-justice Merrick Garland. He says the Justice Department strongly disagrees with the court's decision. This decision deals a devastating blow to reproductive freedom in the United States. It will have an immediate and irreversible impact on the lives of people across the country. It will be greatly disproportionate in its effect, with the greatest burdens felt by people of color and those of limited financial means. I wasn't aware that babies were just solely a burden and a horror to be born by people of color and people who are poor. But, says Merrick Garland, today's decision does not eliminate the ability of states to keep abortion legal within their borders. The Constitution continues to restrict states' authority to ban reproductive services provided outside their borders. We recognize that traveling to obtain reproductive care may not be feasible in many circumstances, but under bedrock constitutional principles, women who reside in states that have banned access to comprehensive reproductive care must remain free to seek that care in states where it is legal. Moreover, under fundamental First Amendment principles, individuals must remain free to inform and counsel each other about the reproductive care available in other states. Advocates with different views on this issue have the right to and will voice their opinions, peacefully expressing a view protected by the First Amendment. But we must be clear, violence and threats of violence are not protected by the First Amendment. The Justice Department will not tolerate this. We will continue to protect healthcare providers and individuals seeking reproductive health services in states where those services remain legal. The department strongly supports efforts by Congress to codify Americans' reproductive rights. The Department of Justice is now sounding off on whether Congress should recodify Roe. The Department of Justice, what a joke. These people suggest that they are in favor of the institutional merit, that these institutions are going to be shored up by the non-politicization. How? Explain. The DOJ is now fervently in the camp of we are just Joe Biden and Joe Biden is us, and there is no gap between us. We will express our political views on just Supreme Court cases that have been decided, and we will enforce, like, the permanent politicization of the bureaucracy is destroying the institutional credibility of the DOJ. It just does not exist anymore. I don't trust the DOJ. You shouldn't trust the DOJ. There is no reason to trust the DOJ that releases statements overtly saying that it disagrees with Supreme Court decisions and pledging particular enforcement of particular sides of the law. Well, by the way, ignoring for the last several months attacks on pro-life clinics. They say federal agencies may continue to provide reproductive health services to the extent authorized by federal law. Federal employees who carry out their duties by providing such services must be allowed to do so free from the threat of liability. It is the department's long-standing positions that states may not impose criminal or civil liability on federal employees who perform their duties in a manner authorized by federal law. So this is Merrick Garland saying that the federal government should now directly subsidize abortion inside the states to make up for this, and that the states wouldn't be able to stop that, which is nothing gives the federal government the power or ability to perform abortions inside states. That's insane. That's basically what Merrick Garland is arguing for. He says the Justice Department will use every tool at our disposal to protect reproductive freedom. We will not waver from the department's founding responsibility to protect civil rights of all Americans. I have never heard of such a thing. I honest to goodness, I've never heard of the Justice Department sounding off in this way. It is an astonishing thing. Okay, meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi is sounding off, saying that she's having a bad morning. Well, you know, for the rest of the country, Nancy Pelosi having a bad morning is actually quite a good morning. Here is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, but not for long.
There's no point in saying good morning, because it certainly is not one. This morning, the radical Supreme Court is eviscerating Americans' rights and endangering their health and safety. But the Congress will continue to act to overcome this extremism and protect the American people. Today, the Republican-controlled Supreme Court has achieved their dark, extreme goal of ripping away a woman's right to make their own reproductive health decisions.
Okay, I mean, the language here, the radicals, it's a dark day. Congress will now have to vote. Wait, aren't you the Speaker of the House? Like over here? Aren't you like the head of the House of Representatives? And you're decrying the ability that you now have the ability to vote on an issue you didn't have the ability to vote on yesterday. I've never heard of such a thing. So the Supreme Court says, guys, not our purview. Legislature, have at it. Nancy Pelosi's like, you can't give us that responsibility. That's dark and terrible. We will act today. I mean, we won't, but we'll say we will, but we won't. But we won't. The pathetic nature of a legislature decrying the fact that the Supreme Court just said that they can now legislate on an issue that's nuts to me. It's just nuts to me. It's crazy. Meanwhile, you have the irrepressibly stupid Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She went down to the Supreme Court doing what she does best, yelling and agitating and with no actual remedy in mind.
Illegitimate! This decision! Illegitimate! This decision! Illegitimate! Into the streets! Into the streets!
She's having such a good time. She's so happy.
Into the streets! Into the streets! Into the streets! Into the streets! Into the streets!
Okay, in the streets is what she's yelling right there. In the streets. And illegitimate. The Supreme Court, so it was only illegitimate the minute that she lost. That's when it was illegitimate. Nancy Pelosi, by the way, continued. She was saying that, of course, things are super duper duper terrible and no good and very bad. Also, the reactions are pouring in fast and furious, and we are sort of reacting in real time to them. Again, to me, the most astonishing reaction here is from Merrick Garland. That it's so crazy. It is just so crazy to me. Maxine Waters says, to hell with the Supreme Court, we will defy them. Okay, good luck with that. Meanwhile, Rob Bonta, the Attorney General in the state of California, he correctly points out, I want you to know the SCOTUS ruling does not change your rights in California. Abortion remains fully legal in our state. Yeah, so this is why, by the way, all of the heat that is being generated is going to dissipate pretty quickly. Because if you want to go to abortion Disneyland, You can head on over to Los Angeles anytime you damn well please, right? That is still, unfortunately, the ability of the of people who wish to kill the unborn in this country. So that's all solid stuff happening. Bette Midler said, "Get ready, gays. You're next." Okay. So they're having a normal one. Meanwhile, Chuck Schumer says, "Today is one of the darkest days our country has ever seen, ever in history." So just to note, our country has seen a civil war in which hundreds of thousands of Americans were slain over whether black people would get to be treated as human beings rather than property. This country saw lynchings for like a century. This country saw Japanese rounded up and interned during World War II. This country saw eugenicist sterilization of what they termed the mentally unfit in the 1920s. This country saw actual religious war in parts of the West, ranging from Missouri to Utah. Like, there have been some real bad days in American history, like some seriously horrible days. This day, when the Supreme Court said, not our business, and all the law reverted back to say, that's one of the darkest days in American history, according to Chuck Schumer. Interesting take there. Is that American women are having their rights taken by 5 unelected justices on the extremist MAGA court. Extremist MAGA. These justices, appointed by Republicans and presiding without accountability, have stolen the fundamental right to abortion. So, by the way, anybody who thinks that the justices are under physical threat, yeah, I mean, I'm getting that impression a little bit. Pretty amazing. Okay, so here is Nancy Pelosi extending her comments on what a horrible and dark day it is. I mean, it's even worse than the time that her husband drove drunk and almost killed somebody.
Right now, they're saying in states that they can arrest doctors and all the rest. What is happening here? What is happening here? A woman's fundamental health decisions are her own to make in consultation with her doctor, her faith, her family, not some right-wing politicians that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell packed the court with. While Republicans seek to punish and control women, Democrats will keep fighting ferociously to enshrine Roe v. Wade into the law of the land.
She's a very religious Catholic, by the way. You should note. How dare you challenge her Catholicism? Also, kill as many babies as possible, man. Yeah, you got to do that. So, again, what does this break down into? It's going to break down into some pure screaming at the sky. The media is going to lose it because this is what the media do. So NBC's Pete Williams, he says, we're about to become a divided country. Oh, we weren't before? You mean you didn't notice? Pete, welcome to the ballgame, sir.
13 states have what are called trigger laws that were intended to make abortion illegal in those states once the Supreme Court reached this decision. In a few of those states, the law takes effect immediately. In some, they have to wait for the state attorney general to certify that this is what the Supreme Court has done. That's 13 states in which abortion will shortly be illegal. And in the rest of up to about half the states, they are expected soon to make it illegal. So we're about to become a divided country, Lester, where abortion is legal in about half the states, illegal in half the states.
Okay, this is what is called federalism. There are a bunch of laws that vary from state to state. I mean, we may have pretended that federalism doesn't exist in the United States. It does. Now, again, would I prefer that there is federal legislation protecting the lives of the unborn? Sure. Would I prefer there was a constitutional amendment, which is what I think it really would take in order to protect the lives of the unborn? Absolutely. And the constitutional amendment, by the way, on a legal level, is the proper response here. A constitutional amendment protecting federally the lives of the unborn is what the right should seek. They should seek state-level legislation locally. Going just to Congress and saying we want to protect the lives of the unborn by passing, some sort of broad abortion act. The problem with that is that it lasts for about 5 minutes, and it's unclear what the scope of Congress's actual authority is in regulating intrastate issues like criminal law, for example. Now, I understand that we've completely obliterated the sort of restrictions on what the federal government can do. The federal government can now regulate how many gallons of water you use in your shower every day. But, from a sort of classical constitutional point of view, this was the purview of the state. So if you wish to do this federally, really we should be seeking a constitutional amendment. But I'm absolutely flabbergasted by members of the Democratic Congress saying, how dare you kick this issue back to us where we can argue it? See, here's the thing. The left doesn't like arguments. They don't like arguments. They're not interested. in arguments. What they want is just absolute rule. And the fact that they are treating this as authoritarian rule, when it is literally the opposite, it is the Supreme Court saying, we, the unelected justices of the Supreme Court, will not cram down our own personal opinions on 330 million people living in 50 different states. We're instead going to delegate that back out where it belongs. The fact that the left treats this as a usurpation of power in some way is totally mad. It is absolutely 100% ass backwards illogical. Some of the loudest voices here are people like Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul is the governor of New York because Andrew Cuomo couldn't quit grabbing ass. So she fell upward into that position where she has done a predictably terrible job. And Kathy Hochul says, well, we're still going to do abortion in this state. We do love our abortion. I mean, we're definitely going to be doing that. And she, of course, is she's correct. In the state of New York, they will be doing the abortions, like forever and always.
This is appalling. We have to be able to have the right to make a determination based on what our citizens want. I'm not governing Texas. That's fine. They can do what they want there. But I should have the right to be the voice of the people of this state who want sensible gun safety legislation. I assure you, we are not going to allow this to happen on our subways. Does the same thing
on gun safety that she does on Roe, by the way. This is a clip from her last night on gun legislation, because the Supreme Court also ruled in a pretty massive ruling yesterday which has now been completely obliterated from the headlines, that you actually do have a right to conceal carry unless the state can demonstrate some serious countervailing interest and actually has to apply that objectively. But again, the idea here from the left is that we get to rule how we want, and there are no hard and fast objective metrics of what different branches of government are supposed to do. I'm seeing a lot of insurrection-y kind of behavior today. Maxine Waters is out there yelling in front of the Supreme Court literally right now, women are going to control their bodies no matter how they try and stop us. The hell with the Supreme Court. We will defy them, which is always exciting stuff. Can we say that's insurrection-y? It feels a little insurrection-y, right? We were told that attacking the institutions of the United States is insurrection-y. It seems a little insurrection-y to me. Meanwhile, Glenn Youngkin is seeking in Virginia a 15-week abortion ban, which again is pretty moderate. I mean, 15-week abortion ban, by the way, is kind of in line with most European states. We are seeing again that there is some polling out from NBC that shows that people are sort of temporarily animated by the abortion issue, but then it goes back down. According to Amy Walter, who is a Cook political reporter, she says NBC polling from May found that the salience of abortion jumped 16 points from previous spring polling. Those most engaged on the issue were members of the Democratic coalition, college women, liberal, Biden 2020 voters. But among swing voters, the salience of abortion was not nearly as significant. So, which is what you would expect, because, again, the people who are likely to get abortions are the people who are also most likely to be exercised about this. Everybody else is going to be like, Yeah, so it'll be fascinating to see what the left practically does. But I think that the preparations for violence are not out of bounds tonight, considering that the left, in the aftermath of even the leak, you had a terrorist group that was out there basically burning up pro-life centers. And the DOJ doing nothing. Protesters are outside chanting legal abortion on demand. This decision must not stand. Well, that's sad for you. Sorry. I'm sorry the Constitution is happening to you, gang. We are awaiting the President of the United States with his card. He needs a card to inform him as to what he is going to say. I point this out only because yesterday there was an actual picture of Joe Biden, who I don't know how you conclude that he is anything other than in a state of serious mental decline when you see this picture. There's a picture of him holding a note card informing him on what to do during a drop-by event. It literally says, it's a set of instructions, physical instructions for the President of the United States, who's in a state of cognitive decline. Every time I say the word you, if you're listening to this and not watching, you have to understand that you is in capital letters. You enter the Roosevelt Room and say hello to participants. You take your seat, not somebody else's seat. You take your seat. Press enters. You give brief comments. Press departs. You ask Liz Schuler, President AFL-CIO, a question. Note, Liz is joining virtually. I love they have to inform him of this. Like he's just going to be asking Ghost. He's going to be like, well, where are you, Liz? God love you. You thank participants. You depart. He's with it, guys. Everything is fine. Everything is going to go great. I'm just surprised that it doesn't say on this card, you breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in, you breathe out, because that might be what it takes to keep the President of the United States on this side of the ledger when it comes to life versus not life. Meanwhile, there are a bunch of other states that are seeking to strengthen their pro-life laws. According to NPR, Kansas voters on August 2nd are going to decide whether to amend the state constitution with a provision saying it does not promise access to abortion. That'll be interesting to find out. There are a bunch of people on the left who are today suggesting that all of the justices on the Supreme Court lied because they said that they believe in precedent. There's not a single Supreme Court justice nominee in modern American history who can answer the question honestly and expect to be confirmed as to what kind of precedent they support. Because after all, everybody knows that not everybody's going to support every precedent. I mean, that is sort of the purpose of the Supreme Court. Some precedents are going to be overruled. Some rulings are going to be changed. So, again, things are very hot and bothered out in commentary land. We are seeing the immediate freak out. We have Mary Ziegler over at the New York Times. Roe's death will change American democracy. She says, history gives us no reason to believe that national sanity will prevail. Opinions about legal abortion were polarized before 1973. Americans have held vastly different views about abortion since the 60s, nor did Roe's short circuit promising consensus solutions. The dissolution of Roe will not make tensions disappear. Several states have already issued sweeping laws. More fundamentally, the story the Supreme Court tells is dangerously incomplete. The decades-long fight to reverse Roe was not an effort to restore democracy, but instead an attempt to change the way American democracy works. One that now realized will touch areas of life well removed from reproduction. The leaders of the anti-abortion movement have long seen their cause as a fight for human rights, in which compromise was a betrayal of principle. Oh, so in other words, it's the anti-abortion people who made politics extreme. Otherwise, politics would be totally sane. It wasn't you guys. It will never be a source of amazement to me that the left, which has declared open war on pretty much every institution of traditional American society, has now decided that it is the right that created the conflict. That is the part that is truly amazing to me. That it is the right that you guys created this conflict. Okay, so again, we are still awaiting comment from the addled president of the United States. He's supposed to join us at any moment. They'll hit him with a vitamin B12 shot, and then he will be jostled into action, and words will come out of his face hole. We will analyze the alleged words coming out of his face hole when he joins us. Meanwhile, former Vice President Pence has now called for a national ban on abortion. He says, by returning the question of abortion to the states and to the people, the Supreme Court has righted a historic wrong and reaffirmed the right of the American people to govern themselves at the state level in a manner consistent with their values and aspirations. Now that Roe versus Wade has been consigned to the ash heap of history, a new arena in the cause of life has emerged. It is incumbent on all those who cherish the sanctity of life to resolve that we will take the defense of the unborn and the support for women in crisis pregnancy centers to every state in America. Having been given the second chance for life, we must not rest, we must not relent until the sanctity of life is restored to the center of American law in every state in the land. Now, again, he's calling on people to do this on a state-by-state level. He also put together a video promoting this call for life. Again, I've not seen a comment yet from President Trump on any of this, which is shocking because, I mean, if there's one time in American history when you should be taking a victory lap, this would be the time. I mean, he is the guy who appointed 3 of these justices. Joe Biden, again, is slated to speak. Apparently, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez has been specifically asked now about whether she will condemn violence should it occur, and she is saying no. We'll find that clip as soon as possible. I will say on days like this, doing the show is sort of like drinking from a fire hose because you are just watching as the reactions come in real time. And I will say that the tears are rather delicious. Meanwhile, Justin Trudeau is sounding off because we needed his opinion. Justin Trudeau, handsome Bernie Sanders. He says, no government politician or man should tell a woman what she can and cannot do with her body. I want women in Canada to know we will always stand up for your right to choose. Trying to internationalize the abortion issue to Canada is definitely a unique one from our neighbors to the north. Meanwhile, Trump apparently, reportedly, has been telling people privately that the ruling will be bad for Republicans. I have doubts. I actually think that the ruling will be quite good for Republicans, because if you've ever wanted Republicans to be animated to show up for a state legislative vote, this would be the time, particularly in the swing states. Worthy of note here, there was a leaker, you'll recall, who leaked the decision early. The entire goal of the leaker was to shift the decision itself, to essentially cudgel the Supreme Court into reversing its own decision here. That was a giant fail. That person should still be outed, considering that they violated basic protocol over at the Supreme Court. But that giant fail is pretty wonderful. All right, joining us on the line is Professor Carter Snead. He's one of the world's leading experts on public bioethics. He's a professor of law over at University of Notre Dame. Professor Snead, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Great to be on. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, obviously a historic day in the United States. It is amazing that it took this long for Roe versus Wade, a decision that has been reviled by pretty much everybody who's ever read any bit of law, to be overruled. That doesn't make the day any less historic.
No, I agree. It's an amazing day. We should all celebrate this extraordinary achievement, and it's a great tribute to those justices on the court who had the courage to release their ill-gotten authority to impose their will on the country on the question of abortion and give it back to the people, where we had it prior to 1973 and where every country in the world governs themselves on abortion rather than submitting to the fiat of unelected judges. So you're right. I mean, hardly anyone defends Roe's and Casey's reasoning as such. They all talk about the policy angle, why abortion is important, or they make noise about stare decisis, none of which is persuasive as far as what the court's role is, which is to interpret the Constitution. So I'm encouraged and happy that we have 5 justices on the court who are willing to release this question back to the American people where it belongs.
Now, Professor Snead, one of the things that's pretty amazing is in the dissent is fairly obvious that they have no concern whatsoever for the balancing concern of prenatal life. Every argument that they make in favor of upholding Roe is a policy argument that extends all the way up to the point of birth. They talk about a woman's autonomy. They talk about a woman's right to choose, and how if she doesn't have this right to choose, it's going to inhibit women from taking their full place in American life. And then they sort of pay lip service to the idea that prenatal life should be something that we are worried about. But it seems essentially that if they had their way, then they would, if they had a majority, they would be basically invalidating any restriction on abortion whatsoever. So, I mean, it really is an amazing thing that Mitch McConnell held up the confirmation of Merrick Garland until the election of 2016. And thank God President Trump won. And we actually ended up with some justices who have occasionally glanced at the Constitution.
Well, yeah, I would say, I mean, as you know, and your listeners know, there's nothing. I mean, Mitch McConnell exercised courage, but he also exercised authority that he appropriately holds in not having any hearings for Attorney General Garland. It's well within his authority to do that. We better believe that if the shoe was on the other foot, that's what would have happened if Chuck Schumer had been in charge or Harry Reid had been in charge. And so I completely agree. And the dissent is striking because the interest that they keep focusing on in terms of women is not even the bodily burdens of pregnancy or the psychic burdens of pregnancy. They keep talking about a woman's freedom to pursue her open future. So that means that's not just about pregnancy. That also includes parenthood as well. And so it is arresting, and I agree with you. Every argument that they make and that advocates for abortion rights make in the public square begs the question of the unborn child. It implicitly assumes that the unborn child is worth nothing, even though he or she is a living, independent member of the human family, member of the human species.
If you are interested in this sort of topic, by the way, everybody should go over to Daily Wire. We have a fantastic documentary called Choosing Life, all about the topic of Roe versus Wade and why it needed to be overruled. Professor Snead, one of the, I think, fascinating elements of the decision is the reliance. Sorry, the documentary is called Choosing Death, rather, not Choosing Life. The reliance on the substantive due process clause and the refusal to overrule it is one of the strange aspects of this particular decision. It's something that Justice Thomas notes in his wonderful concurrence. Now, Thomas he has the credibility of arguing that substantive due process is garbage, and therefore all cases decided under its auspices should also be tossed. The left, because it doesn't understand how the court works or it doesn't care and wishes to see the court as an explicitly political tool, they say that basically the court can never make a ruling without approving of the result of the ruling, which of course is not what the court is designed to do. What Thomas says is substantive due process is a garbage basis. We should overrule Obergefell, we should overrule Lawrence, we should overrule Griswold, and send all that stuff back to the states. The court obviously has no taste for any of that, and instead they've kept alive the notion of substantive due process, which is a sort of ghost in the closet when it comes to constitutional law.
Yeah, so I agree with you. The first thing to notice is that it is true that Justice Thomas is an extraordinary justice and an extraordinary mind, but he appears to be the only taker for the proposition on the court that substantive due process should be completely abandoned. But I will say Justice Alito gives us a framework for substantive due process that really cabins the discretion of the judges and justices if that doctrine is to persist, which appears it will, but given the current composition of the court, it limits those unenumerated rights, those implicit rights that aren't written in the Constitution, to those that are deeply rooted and firmly grounded in the nation's history and tradition, legal tradition. And that obviously rules out abortion, which was a crime at the time of the ratification of the 14th Amendment and was contrary to what the dissent says. And it's extraordinary how badly they botched the history. There was never a right to abortion at common law prior to the 19th century. There was never a right. Abortion was always legally disfavored. It was criminally prosecuted after quickening because that's the only time a prosecutor could identify an actus reus, an actual, the presence of a life that had been taken. But even more deeply, prior to quickening, there are examples of the court treating the killing of a fetus as a predicate for felony murder. In the event that a woman loses her life in the context of an abortion. So the court, the dissent completely misrepresents the history, which Justice Alito carefully articulates. And the reason he does so is because that is his significant restraint on the practice of substantive due process, which we saw for the first time in the assisted suicide cases in the late 1990s when Chief Justice Rehnquist articulated a similar case.
And, it is pretty fascinating. The court is obviously attempting, and they say it over and over in the decision, not to reopen some of these controversial cases like Obergefell or Lawrence or Griswold, because they, I think, understand that what the left is going to try to do is lump in Roe with all those other more popular cases and now less controversial cases. And so the court explicitly over and over says that they are not going to touch those other cases. This does not stop the left from citing Justice Thomas's concurrence. He is literally the only vote for overruling that stuff, even though he happens to be absolutely correct. Professor Snead, you're involved in the documentary that we made, Choosing Death. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that documentary and the importance of the pro-life movement and where things kind of go from here.
Absolutely. It is a great documentary, and I was honored to be involved in its production. I talk a lot from a legal perspective about how completely misguided and wrong-headed Roe v. Wade and Planned Parenthood versus Casey were as a matter of constitutional interpretation, showing that they were never, ever attached to the text, history, or tradition of the Constitution. They were egregiously wrong the moment they were decided. They're quite actually different from each other because the arc of American abortion jurisprudence has always been a kind of conclusion in search of a rationale. The court has twisted and turned and tortured itself for 50 years trying to explain why it is there should be a right to abortion, which actually doesn't exist in the Constitution itself. And we talk a lot about the history as well. Insofar as where we go from here, I think that all of us who have been working hard to try to clear this obstacle, this 50-year obstacle to protecting unborn children and their mothers and families in need, now are free to work in the political process to try to create structures that will care and protect unborn babies in the womb, but also care for their mothers, care for families in need, and put in place structures of support that will show the heart of the pro-life movement, which has always been a movement about unconditional love and radical hospitality and welcoming people no matter who they are, and the proposition that everybody counts.
Well, that is Professor Curtis Snead from University of Notre Dame. He's also the author of a bunch of books. You should check them out. Thanks so much for your time, Professor Snead, and again, big day for the country.
Thank you so much. Keep up the great work.
So, meanwhile, a lot of people online very angry at Bernie Sanders because their basic contention is if it had not been for Bernie, then Hillary would have been elected in 2016, and this never would have happened. Meanwhile, we do have Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, the id of the Democratic Party, who's now saying that she essentially is refusing any call to denounce violence after the ruling.
Will you condemn the violence proposed by pro-abortion groups? Will she not condemn it? Are you not condemning the violence proposed by pro-abortion groups? So I guess no condemnation.
Listen, I'm just happy today that she got to wear her pink outfit. That's really the important thing. That she's wearing that pink outfit. And she keeps on walking. Meanwhile, we have our celebrity class commenting on all of this, which is really what we need. Sophia Bush says they will never end abortion, only safe abortion. This is not about life, it's about control. Those MFers. Okay, again, the baseline notion that all women who wanted to get abortions and now are going to reconsider because they live in states in which it is against the law, that those women are now going to engage in unsafe abortions and it's going to be back alley coat hangers and all the rest of this. This is nonsense. Padme Lakshmi, another not wonderful human being, says people will still get abortions. These procedures won't stop because Roe versus Wade is overturned. This will only prevent safe legal abortions from taking place. People who have money, time, and resources will still find avenues for their procedures. But the most vulnerable of our community, what choices are those individuals who are mostly BIPOC left with? This is the catalyst for a public health crisis. The right to decide when to start a family or not is a choice every individual should be able to make on their terms when the time is right for them. Yes, that's why we have contraception and marriage and abstinence and all sorts of other things. Again, rape and incest is a tiny percentage of the number of abortions done every year in the United States. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton is sounding off. Most Americans believe the decision to have a child is one of the most sacred decisions there is. I love the reversal. The decision whether to have a child is a sacred decision. Well, the decision to kill a child, by contrast, is a rather not sacred decision. It's like straight to the jaws of Molech kind of stuff. Most Americans believe the decision to have a child is one of the most sacred decisions there is, says Hillary, and that such decisions should remain between patients and their doctors. Today, the Supreme Court opinion will live in infamy as a step backward for women's rights and human rights. Well, I mean, if Hillary says so. Michelle Obama, she says, I'm heartbroken today. Heartbroken. If there aren't more dead babies, I mean, that breaks your heart, doesn't it? I'm heartbroken for people around this country who just lost the fundamental right to make informed decisions about their own bodies. I love the fact that we are going to pretend that sex is always non-consensual and that contraception is not widely available. I love this pretend world. I'm heartbroken. We may now be destined to learn the painful lessons of a time before Roe was made law of the land, a time when women risked losing their lives getting illegal abortions. By the way, the number of women who died due to illegal abortions year on year in the United States during the time when abortion was widely illegal was statistically insignificant, very, very, very low number of women. A time when the government denied women control over their reproductive freedoms, forced them to move forward with pregnancies they didn't want, and then abandoned them once their babies were born. That is what our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers lived through. Oh, wait, hold on. I noticed something in that sentence. That is what our mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers lived through. You know, in order for you to be here saying that thing, they had to not kill your grandmother, your mother, or you. I love this. In our mothers and great-grandmothers and great-great-grandmothers, they weren't allowed to abort. Yes, I noticed. You're here, aren't you? Interesting. Ronald Reagan once said the only people who are in favor of abortion are people who've already been born. Yep. She says, this moment is difficult, but our story does not end here. It may not feel like we're able to do much right now, but we can, and we must. Okay, go for it. Barack Obama says, today, the Supreme Court not only reversed nearly 50 years of precedent, it relegated the most intensely personal decision someone can make to the whims of politicians and ideologues, attacking the essential freedoms of millions of Americans. I love hearing from the advocates of forcibly vaccinate your small child or mask them up, that your essential freedoms are under attack when we say you're not allowed to kill a baby in the womb. Viola Davis says, and so it goes, gutted. Now more than ever, we have to use our voice and power. We, the people. Well, I mean, I'll tell you something about being gutted. I have some thoughts on that one. So our celebrity class, they are the finest among us, obviously. That is really the important thing. Now, important to note here that there was another big Supreme Court decision that broke yesterday. That Supreme Court decision is essentially says that the Second Amendment exists. It says that you're allowed to keep and bear arms outside your home. So DC versus Heller said you have an individual Second Amendment right to have a gun in your home, because that was the law at issue in Washington, D.C. And now the new gun case says that you have to be given some sort of standard for why the state can deny you the ability to carry outside the home. In other words, the right to self-defense doesn't end at your front door. There are a bunch of states that have what we call may-issue laws. Those may-issue laws basically say that if you show up and you ask for a concealed carry permit, the state can issue you one based on their assessment of your need for the gun. The Supreme Court says you can't do that. That's a violation of the Second Amendment. People on the left are losing their ever-loving minds over this. This is the end of world for them. They're deeply, deeply upset, obviously. And Joe Biden yesterday ripped that Supreme Court decision. We're still awaiting his, I'm sure, what will be inspirational and sterling verbiage on Roe versus Wade. Here's what he had to say yesterday about the Supreme Court gun decision.
I am disappointed in the Supreme Court gun decision. There is one little bit of solace in the minority making up the majority opinion has laid out that it affects not every state. If you have to say you shall do A, B, C, they're the ones that are going to have problems. But most say may. I mean, may, and I got it reversed, may and shall. And so the gun laws in 40 of these states are still in place based on the decision. Not good enough, but I think it's a bad decision. I think it's not reasoned accurately, but I'm disappointed.
He's disappointed. Also, he's not with us anymore. The amazing thing, there is a very famous statement by Dr. Samuel Johnson. There was a famous sexist joke that he made, in which he said that when a woman begins to talk, you're amazed in the same way you would be if a dog stood on its hind legs. Not that it's doing it well, just that it's doing it at all. That's a very sexist and horrifying joke by Dr. Samuel Johnson, who is now canceled. But when Joe Biden talks, the amazing thing is not that he is saying anything amazing. It's just that I didn't really know that a person who is no longer alive can speak. So that's exciting news. By the way, the fact that Joe Biden, is going to speak again. I think we are all awaiting with bated breath the one long word that Joe Biden will utter. When I say one long word, that's because it's all just one giant slurred word from him. I think that one of the things that you're going to see from the Democratic left is just a refusal to abide by law now. I mean, it's insurrection-y when the right does it. It's very, very good when the left does it. Eric Adams, yesterday, the mayor of New York, a state whose laws were just invalidated explicitly by the Supreme Court on guns, he said, nothing changes today, nothing.
The opinion claims to be based on nation historical past, but does not account for the reality of today. It ignores the present and it endangers
states. Joe Biden has walked out and sounds are emanating from his glorious face hole. So here we go. Here's Joe Biden. We're going to try and take him live here.
Already recognized. They didn't limit it. They simply took it away. That's never been done to a right so important to so many Americans. But they did it. It's a sad day for the court and for the country. 50 years ago, Roe v. Wade was decided and has been the law of the land since then. This landmark case protected a woman's right to choose, her right to make intensely personal decisions with her doctor, free from the interference of politics. It reaffirmed basic principles of equality, that women have the power to control their own destiny, and it reinforced a fundamental right of privacy, a right of each of us to choose how to live our lives. Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk. As chairman and ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, as vice president and now as president of the United States, I've studied this case carefully. I've overseen more Supreme Court confirmations than anyone today, where this case was always discussed. I believe Roe v. Wade was the correct decision as a matter of constitutional law and application of the fundamental right to privacy and liberty in matters of family and personal autonomy. It was a decision on a complex matter that drew a careful balance between a woman's right to choose earlier in her pregnancy and the state's ability to regulate later in her pregnancy. A decision with broad national consensus that most Americans of faith and backgrounds found acceptable, and that had been the law of the land for most of the lifetime of Americans today. And it was a constitutional principle upheld by justices appointed by Democrat and Republican presidents alike. Roe v. Wade was a 7-2 decision, written by a justice appointed by a Republican president, Richard Nixon. In the 5 decades that followed Roe v. Wade, justices appointed by Republican presidents from Eisenhower, Nixon, and Reagan George W. Bush were among the justices who voted to uphold the principles set forth in Roe v. Wade. It was 3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, who were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view. The court has done what it has never done before, expressly take away a constitutional right that is so fundamental to so many Americans that had already been recognized. The court's decision to do so will have real and immediate consequences. State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls who are forced to bear their rapist's child, with the child a consequence. It just stuns me. So extreme that doctors will be criminalized for fulfilling their duty to care. Imagine having a young woman have to carry the child of incest as a consequence of incest. No option. Too often the case. The poor women are going to be hit the hardest. It's cruel. In fact, the court laid out state laws criminalizing abortion that go back to the 1800s as rationale. The court literally taking America back 150 years. This is a sad day for the country, in my view. But it doesn't mean the fight's over. Let me be very clear and unambiguous. The only way we can secure a woman's right to choose, and the balance that existed, is for Congress to restore the protections of Roe v. Wade as federal law. No executive action from the president can do that. And if Congress, as it appears, lacks the votes to do that now, voters need to make their voices heard. This fall, we must elect more senators and representatives who will codify women's right to choose into federal law once again. Elect more state leaders to protect this right at the local level. We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedoms are on the ballot. The right to privacy, liberty, equality, they're all on the ballot. Until then, I will do all of my power to protect a woman's right in states where they will face the consequences of today's decision. While the court's decision cast a dark shadow over a large swath of the land, many states in this country still recognize a woman's right to choose. So, if a woman lives in a state that restricts abortion, the Supreme Court's decision does not prevent her from traveling from her home state to the state that allows it. It does not prevent a doctor in that state from treating her. As the Attorney General has made clear, women must remain free to travel safely to another state to seek care they need. My administration will defend that bedrock right. If any state or local official, high or low, tries to interfere with a woman's exercising her basic right to travel, I will do everything in my power to fight that deeply un-American attack. My administration will also protect a woman's access to medications that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, like contraception, which is essential for preventative health care, mifepristone, which the FDA approved 20 years ago to safely end early pregnancies and is commonly used to treat miscarriages. Some states are saying that they'll try to ban or severely restrict access to these medications. But extremist governors and state legislators are looking to block the mail or search a person's medicine cabinet or control a woman's actions by tracking data on her apps she uses are wrong and extreme and out of touch with the majority of Americans. The American Medical Association, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists wrote to me and Vice President Harris stressing that these laws are not based on evidence and asking us to act to protect access to care. They say by limiting access to these medicines, maternal mortality will climb in America. That's what they say. Today, I'm directing the Department of Health and Human Services to take steps to ensure these critical medications are available to the fullest extent possible. And the politicians cannot interfere in the decisions that should be made between a woman and her doctor. And my administration will remain vigilant as the implications of this decision play out. I've warned about how this decision risks the broader right to privacy for everyone. That's because Roe recognized the fundamental right to privacy that has served as a basis for so many more rights that we've come to take for granted, that are ingrained in the fabric of this country. The right to make the best decisions for your health. The right to use birth control, a married couple in the privacy of their bedroom, for God's sake. The right to marry the person you love. Now, Justice Thomas said as much today. He explicitly called to reconsider the right of marriage equality, the right of couples to make their choices on contraception. This is extreme and dangerous path the court is now taking us on. Let me close with 2 points. First, I call on everyone, no matter how deeply they care about this decision, to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable. Threats and intimidation are not speech. We must stand against violence in any form, regardless of your rationale. Second, I know so many of us are frustrated and disillusioned that the court has taken something away that's so fundamental. I know so many women are now going to face incredibly difficult situations. I hear you. I support you. I stand with you. The consequences and the consensus of the American people, core principles of equality, liberty, dignity, and the stability of the rule of law demand that Roe should not have been overturned. With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They've made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world. But this decision must not be the final word. My administration will use all of its appropriate lawful powers, but Congress must act. And with your vote, you can act. You can have the final word. This is not over. Thank you very much. More to say this in weeks to come. Thank you.
And he's gone. And he's out. All right, somebody grab that hook, bring him out, and hook him back up to that catheter. So there is the president of the United States who says that it is wrong and extreme and terrible and horrible and no good and very bad. It's Joe Biden's no good, terrible, horrible, very bad day. It is worth noting here that he called Justice Thomas extreme. He talked about how everybody who didn't rule like he wanted was wrong, extreme, and out of touch. Says the president who believes that men can be women and that abortion should be legal on demand until point of birth. Also happens to be a very devout Catholic, you may notice. Like a very, my favorite thing about Joe Biden is when he drops phrases like "for God's sake" in a speech about how abortion should be legal until point of birth, and also how men should marry other men. That really is, when I think about real Catholic principles, that's what I think of. I think of Joe Biden, very devout Catholic. The continuation of insanity outside the Supreme Court, is ongoing. I will say, to Joe Biden's credit, he did call for no violence. He did say that he condemns the violence up front, which is a good thing. That is a good thing. Now, does that mean people are going to obey him? Probably not. But the simple fact that he did it is he gets credit for that. Not a particularly coherent speech from the president. He basically just cribbed from the dissent, talking about how important abortion is and how magical abortion is. He kept coming back to the idea that there's no fundamental right has ever been taken away in American history, like this fundamental American. Well, actually, there was a fundamental right to own other human beings, according to Dred Scott v. Sanford, up until the Civil War, at which point it was completely abolished through the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans and then the establishment of the 13th and 14th Amendments. So, yeah, there have been some pretty bad, quote unquote, fundamental rights in America before, the worst of which was, owning another human being. But the right to kill another human being in your womb, that's a pretty bad fundamental right. And so that fundamental right being removed by the Supreme Court, still available, by the way, in California and New York and all the rest, that is, to him, a great evil that it has been removed. So it's, again, Joe Biden not saying anything particularly convincing. He thinks he's going to win election based on this. He kept coming back to vote for Democratic senators, vote for a Democratic congressperson, vote for Democrats in your legislature. That is not likely to be what happens. New York is likely to continue to be deeply blue. The people who are most involved in the abortion issue, the most extreme about the abortion issue, live in the blue states. They do not live in the purple states. And so this issue being relegated back to state level means that people will vote like they typically do in the states. And it's precisely that Joe Biden's objecting to. See, here's the crucial point. What Joe Biden objects to is the fact that Kansas is going to have Kansas law and Alabama is going to have Alabama law and Mississippi is going to have Mississippi law. He wants the Supreme Court to declare law for everyone, but the law that he likes. Well, he's not getting his wish. I also do not think this is going to save him from his own garbage presidency, which has left him with a 33% approval rating. When it comes time for the election of 2022, Democrats will receive a shellacking, and this is not likely to be at the top of the ballot. So there is the president of the United States ending what is a very bad week for him and a very good week for the United States and for the unborn. So as we say, now the fight begins in favor of the unborn. It begins with all of us getting active at the state and local level to protect the unborn. And so, take a moment, take a breath. This is a historically wonderful day for the United States, for morality and for decency in the country, as well as for the institutional credibility of a Supreme Court that had become basically just a tool of the left over the course of my entire lifetime. Alrighty, coming up soon, Matt Walsh will be live on DW over at Daily Wire, also at his YouTube channel, so make sure that you tune on over there. Thanks so much for joining us for this special live broadcast of the Supreme Court decision. Head on over to dailywire.com for more live coverage right now. We'll see you in just a little bit.